Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and we've got a really fascinating topic lined up for you. Have you ever dragged yourself home after a networking event feeling like your brain is actually physically bruised?
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. I'm thrilled to be here to break this down with you.
Seriously, it's exhausting. Or, maybe you've sat in a meeting and watched the loudest, most confident person in the room get promoted, even when their ideas were, frankly, objectively terrible.
Which happens way more often than we'd like to admit.
Right. Well, today we are looking at the data behind that exact frustration. We're doing a deep dive into the research of Susan Cain, specifically her book Quiet, to pull back the curtain on this thing called the extrovert ideal.
Yeah, it's basically this hidden cultural bias that fundamentally shapes our lives.
Exactly. And our mission today is to unpack how society got so obsessed with extroversion, look at the hidden superpowers of introverts, and figure out how understanding the biology of your own personality can help you optimize your life. Because whether you're a classic introvert, a loud and proud extrovert, or an ambivert somewhere in the middle, this is going to change how you view success.
It really forces a total reevaluation of how we measure human value. I mean, once you see the mechanics of this extrovert ideal operating in the background of your office, it becomes impossible to unsee.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we usually just assume that favoring loud, outgoing leadership is like a natural human default.
But it isn't, not at all. We connect this to the bigger picture to understand why we're so obsessed with the performance of confidence today. We have to look at a very deliberate shift in the early 20th century.
Yeah, we have to look at how the entire metric for success was just completely rewritten. And the perfect embodiment of that is the story of Dale Carnegie.
Oh, absolutely.
Back in 1902, Carnegie was this poor, super insecure farm boy in Missouri. He was so terrified of public speaking, he actually agonized over what to say to his bride on his wedding day.
Which is wild to think about now.
Right. But then he sees this charismatic Chautauqua speaker mesmerize a crowd, and it clicks for him. Capturing attention is power. So by 1913, he completely transforms into this public speaking icon, teaching businessmen how to project absolute confidence.
And that personal metamorphosis perfectly mirrors America's transition from the culture of character to the culture of personality.
Right, because in the 19th century, in that culture of character, the ideal self was disciplined, honorable, modest.
Exactly. Society revered figures like Abraham Lincoln for private virtue. The focus was entirely on what you did in private, your moral track record. But then the 20th century hits, and the culture of personality takes over.
The lens completely shifts outward.
It does. The new ideal was all about outer charm, magnetism, behaving like a movie star. You weren't valued for quiet integrity anymore. You were valued for commanding a room.
Which, it actually makes sense when you look at the massive urbanization happening right at that time.
Oh, definitely.
People were leaving these small farming communities where everyone knew everyone, right? Your family had lived there for generations. If you were honest, people knew it. But suddenly, millions of people are pouring into the cities.
You're working entirely with strangers.
Exactly. You're a corporate employee or a salesperson. The metric for survival changed overnight. You go from being judged by a lifelong neighbor to being evaluated by a manager based on a 10-second handshake.
And the advertising industry saw that vulnerability and pounced on it immediately.
Yeah, they really did.
Early ads were just utility, like, here is our soap, it cleans your clothes. But by the 1920s, they shifted to selling social salvation. The source material brings up this famous Woodbury soap ad that explicitly warned consumers, all around you, people are judging you silently.
Talk about monetizing paranoia.
Right. Or Williams shaving cream telling men that critical eyes were constantly sizing them up so their face better project pure confidence.
So they essentially convinced an entire generation that any moment of social hesitation was a career killer. And so funny because we act like the pressure to have this flawless performing self started with modern social media influencers, but it actually started with 1920s soap commercials.
That's such a great point, and the psychological establishment backed it up too. In the 1920s, psychologist Alfred Adler popularized the inferiority complex.
Which he originally just meant for infants, right?
Yeah, describing how babies feel in a world of giant adults. But the popular press stripped all the nuance away. Suddenly, normal social anxiety, or just having a reserved temperament, became a medical pathology. Shyness was suddenly a disease that could ruin your life.
So if a century of ads and pop psychology has convinced us that our value is our public performance, that completely explains the massive bias in the corporate world today. We just subconsciously assume the best talker is the best leader.
We equate volume with competence, period. You see the extremes of this extrovert ideal everywhere. Look at Tony Robbins seminars. Hyper-extroverted salesmanship, screaming, firewalking, it's presented as the ultimate human potential.
Yeah, high energy equals success.
Or look at Harvard Business School, which is essentially the global training ground for corporate leadership. Their entire academic model is based on extroversion. Your grade depends heavily on vocal participation, which they literally call airtime.
Oh, I love the part in the research about that exercise they run there, the subarctic survival situation.
Yes, that's a perfect example.
Students are in teams, ranking salvaged items after a fake plane crash. And the data shows that the students who speak the loudest, the fastest, and with the most conviction get their ideas adopted. In one group, a guy actually had extensive backwoods experience. He knew how to survive.
But they ignored him.
Completely, just because he spoke too quietly. The loud, bad ideas beat the quiet, good ones, because our brains use confidence as a totally flawed heuristic for accuracy.
And this heuristic runs so deep, it even shows up in our spiritual lives.
Oh, yeah.
The source material looks at Saddleback Church and the modern evangelical movement.
Yeah.
And, just looking at this impartially as a cultural observation, extroversion is often explicitly equated with faithfulness.
Like the story of Pastor Adam Maheu.
Exactly. He's an introverted minister who felt that because the culture demanded aggressive networking and highly vocal worship, his natural need for solitude was viewed as a spiritual failure. The extrovert ideal leaves almost no space for quiet reflection.
So what does this all mean? I have to push back a little. Are we saying extroverts are actually bad leaders?
Not at all. What's fascinating here is that it entirely depends on the team they're managing. Adam Grant, a management professor at Wharton, researched this at a major pizza chain. He found extroverted leaders generate higher profits, but only when leading passive employees who need external direction.
Okay, so when the team needs a cheerleader.
Right. But when employees are proactive, they take initiative, they offer new ideas. Introverted leaders vastly outperform the extroverts.
And Grant actually measured this using, of all things, t-shirt folding.
He did. It's such a clever study. Teams of college students competed to fold shirts quickly, and the researchers secretly planted an actor in each team to suggest a much faster way to fold them.
Let me guess. The loud leaders totally ignored the actor.
Completely shut them down.
Yeah.
The extroverted leaders wanted to maintain control so badly they ignored a better idea, and their team suffered. But the introverted leaders, they listened, they implemented the new strategy, and their teams were 24% more productive.
Wow.
Introverts excel there because they create a virtuous circle of proactivity. They listen, and they don't let ego get in the way.
Which totally reframes how we should view historical figures. Some of the best leaders were profoundly quiet. Darwin Smith turned Kimberly Clark into a massive global powerhouse, and he was famously shy.
Yep.
Craig Newmark built Craigslist, and he calls himself a classic nerd who'd rather read a book than talk to anyone. Or Rosa Parks. Her power wasn't fiery speeches, it was quiet, unshakable fortitude.
Even Moses is a classic example. The biblical text says he was terrified of public speaking. He had a stutter and begged not to speak to Pharaoh. He actually used his extroverted brother Aaron as his mouthpiece while he did the deep, solitary work.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting though. You're championing solitary work, but the modern corporate world is entirely built on the new groupthink.
Oh, the new groupthink is everywhere.
Right. Open plan offices, kids' desks pushed into pods, mandatory brainstorming retreats. Are you saying all this collaboration is functionally useless for innovation?
It isn't just useless. It's often actively destructive to the creative process. When you look at world-changing innovation, it almost universally requires deep solitude. Take Steve Wozniak.
The Apple guy.
Yeah. The myth is he and Steve Jobs invented the PC in a chaotic, collaborative brainstorming session. The reality, Wozniak designed it completely alone, in his cubicle at Hewlett-Packard at 6:30 in the morning. He later explicitly told creators, the single most important thing you can do is work alone.
But why? What is the actual mechanism making the solitary brain more innovative?
It comes down to cognitive load and deliberate practice. Psychologist Anders Ericsson studied elite violinists in Berlin. All of them engaged with music for about the same amount of time, but the absolute best performers spent dramatically more time practicing in complete solitude.
Because they could focus on their specific weaknesses.
Exactly. True mastery requires identifying your specific gap and focusing intensely on it. You can't do that in a group. Plus, think about an open-plan office. Your brain is constantly running subconscious social threat assessments.
Oh, like tracking movement.
Right. Every time a colleague walks past, a fraction of your cognitive bandwidth is diverted. You cannot achieve deep problem solving in an environment built for interruption.
I always compare it to trying to compose a delicate symphony in the middle of a noisy stock exchange floor. They tell you it's for collaboration, but biologically it's just fracturing your attention.
And the data proves it. In the 1940s, Alex Osborne invented corporate brainstorming. No bad ideas, group synergy, all that. But Marvin Dennett ran a massive study at 3M that proved Osborne totally wrong. Individuals working alone consistently produce more ideas and higher quality ideas than groups.
Because of evaluation apprehension, right? Even if they say no bad ideas, we're biologically terrified of looking stupid, so we self-censor.
We self-censor and we conform. And the neuroscience behind this conformity is genuinely terrifying. Gregory Burns, a neuroscientist, updated the famous ASH conformity studies using fMRI brain scanners.
Right, the original ASH studies were those visual tests. Actors would confidently say the wrong length of a line, and real participants would just agree with the wrong answer to fit in.
Exactly. So Burns wanted to know why. Did they know they were lying just to avoid social friction?
What did the scans show?
Something far more disturbing. When people conformed to the wrong answer, their frontal cortex, the decision-making area, didn't show heightened activity. They weren't consciously choosing to lie. Instead, the activity spiked in the occipital and parietal cortex.
Wait, those are the visual perception areas, aren't they?
Yes. The group wasn't just socially pressuring them into lying. The pressure literally altered their sensory perception of reality. Their brain actually saw the wrong answer as correct because group consensus overrode their own visual cortex.
That is staggering. The group literally changes your reality.
Which raises an important question about the danger of the new groupthink. We force people into open offices, stifling independent thought, and justify it by pointing to the internet as this collaborative triumph. But the profound irony is that the internet open source software, Wikipedia, was built by introverts, sitting quietly alone, contributing without the biological pressure of a group, altering their perception.
So, if introverts have all these advantages, leading proactive teams, doing deliberate practice, resisting perception-altering groupthink, why are they constantly pressured to change? Are we just biologically wired to be introverted or extroverted?
To understand that, we have to look at the biology of quiet. It traces back to Dr. Jerome Kagan's longitudinal studies at Harvard. He brought in 500 4-month-old infants and exposed them to novel stimuli, tape-recorded voices, popping balloons, Q-tips dipped in alcohol.
And the results were super counterintuitive, right?
Totally. About 20% of the babies thrashed their arms and legs and cried lustily at the noise. You'd assume those loud, highly reactive babies became extroverts. But Kagan tracked them for years. The highly reactive thrashing babies grew up to be quiet, cautious introverts. And the calm babies became the bold extroverts.
That is wild.
It is. Kagan's research showed personality is deeply tethered to the amygdala, the brain's emotional switchboard. Introverts have a highly sensitive, highly reactive nervous system. When those infants thrashed, it wasn't extroversion. Their nervous system was overwhelmed by novelty.
Oh, so as they grow up, they manage that sensory overload by retreating to quieter environments.
Precisely. Extroverts, meanwhile, have an under-aroused nervous system. They actually need massive amounts of external stimulation, loud music, crowds, just to feel a baseline level of alertness.
Which leads to this fascinating concept called the orchid hypothesis by Jay Belsky. High reactive kids are like orchids. Plant them in a harsh environment, they're more vulnerable to depression if they have a rough childhood. But put an orchid in a supportive greenhouse.
They thrive spectacularly. High reactive kids in good environments actually show fewer emotional problems and better social skills than the lower reactive dandelion kids who just survive anywhere.
And we see this exact same thing in primates too, right? With the SERT gene.
Yes, the SERT gene regulates the serotonin transporter. The short allele of this gene makes the brain's emotional centers far more sensitive to the environment. It amplifies reactivity.
So what happened with the monkeys?
When monkeys with this highly reactive gene were raised by neglectful mothers, they became anxious and withdrawn. But monkeys with the exact same gene raised by nurturing mothers became the leaders of their troops. Their sensitive nervous systems let them observe subtle social dynamics and build complex alliances.
So a highly reactive nervous system isn't a defect at all, it's an amplifier.
Exactly.
But that begs a really practical question. If I'm an orchid and my amygdala is biologically wired to view a loud networking event as sensory trauma, do I just stay home? Or is there a way to safely stretch my comfort zone?
You don't have to stay home. You can use what's called the rubber band theory of personality. Our biological wiring is elastic. While your amygdala might sound the alarm at a crowded party, you also have a prefrontal cortex, the conscious decision-making center of your brain.
Right, so I can use that to talk myself down.
Yes, you use the prefrontal cortex to actively soothe your amygdala. You remind your nervous system you're safe. But, like a rubber band, you have limits. You can't stretch infinitely without snapping.
It's about finding your sweet spot. I think psychologist Hans Eysenck called it optimal levels of arousal.
That's it. The goal isn't to rewire your amygdala to become an extrovert. It's to mindfully curate your environment. If you need to give a big presentation, stretch the rubber band. But recognize that afterward, you have to return to your sweet spot, a quiet room, a book, to recharge that reactive nervous system.
Man, we have covered so much ground today. We traced the shift from a culture of character to a culture of personality. We dismantled the myth that the loudest person is the best leader, seeing how introverts manage proactive teams. We looked at how the new groupthink literally alters our perception of reality. And we grounded it all in the biology of the amygdala and the orchid hypothesis.
The ultimate takeaway for you listening right now is that you have a biological and historical roadmap. If you're an introvert, you can shed the guilt about needing solitude. It's a biological requirement for your innovation. And if you're an extrovert, you now have a framework to give proactive employees space and to help the high reactive orchids around you bloom.
Absolutely. And I want to leave you with one final unexplored thought to mull over. We know now that our brains have hard-coded biological thresholds for stimulation, and introverts are easily overwhelmed by sensory input. So what happens as we accelerate into this digital age?
Oh, that's a great question.
Right. With the exponential increase in notifications, 24/7 connectivity, and immersive virtual reality, as the sheer sensory noise of the world reaches this deafening pitch, how are the high reactive nervous systems of the next generation going to cope? Will this extreme sensory overload eventually force society to return to a quiet culture of character, if only for sheer biological survival? Something to consider the next time you're exhausted at a networking event, watching the loudest person pitch a terrible idea. Just remember your biology, find your optimal level of arousal, and never be afraid to embrace the power of quiet.